Good morning. It's morning huddle time. Chad Prinky here, as always, along with my good friend, producer, co-host extraordinaire, Stacey
Stop.
Holden. Stacey.
Hey, how do you want us to install this water heater? And my coworker was like, I don't know, install the water heater. Like, why are you even asking me? He's like, well, I don't know if you know, but what you designed, it can't physically fit through the front door of this building.
My class is only 40 minutes. So we have to get this done in 40 minutes. You have to clean up in 40 minutes. And then it also, when you use the miter saw, a lot of kids are scared of the miter saw, and you just see the difference in their confidence when they come in here compared to when they leave. They're excited.
Be announcing a new county that's going to join us in Maryland, so we continue to spread it. And I'll say my peers across the country are starting to take this and adopt this at their local IEC chapters.
Either AI assistant tools, you have AI master builder tools, and then you have kind of a bit of both that are 1 foot in BIM, in current processes, and 1 foot in AI.
Said, Brett, in life, opportunity meets you at your level of preparation.
She said, here's the keys, go forth and do great things.
Good morning. It is huddle time. Morning huddle time. Chad Prinky here alongside Stacey Holzinger. Stacey, how are you today?
I'm doing good. I'm excited for this discussion on mass timber today. I got to go to a building down in DC a couple years ago, and I was blown away by just the awe and the beauty of a project that's being built like that. So I can't wait to hear about more projects in the discussion that Ricky will.
Functional and beautiful.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, that's the idea, right? That's well, I'm also excited for it. I think we'll have a lot of ahas through the course of the conversation about where, what we can be doing to what the industry can be doing to make it more prevalent, and maybe why it's not, and some of those things to dive into. What do you have happening recently, Stace?
Yeah, so MCCEI is doing their Construction Career Day, which was a huge hit, first time last year, in Bowie this year on April 25th. And they have a ton of participation with contractors coming in and doing interactive presentations for high schoolers, and we need volunteers. So we're looking for that right now. I'm also going to be on site interviewing various trades professionals for our big social campaign this summer. So I'm looking forward to that. What about you?
That's awesome. I'm always
doing something. I can't.
It's your idea of fun.
It is. Pathetic? I don't know.
It's not pathetic. It's maybe just I'd call it maybe nerdy. That's all. Just a little bit.
Definitely nerdy.
But that's okay. Nerdy's cool. We're making nerdy cool again. That's what happened. I'm always impressed by the types of things that you choose to do with your time. I think it's the kind of stuff that gives back to you too, which is cool.
Yeah, definitely.
It's awesome. We've been planning something on our end at Well Built that has been a labor of love for the past 6 months to try to get it to a place where it's ready, and we're really excited to launch the leadership boot camp. It's a 3-day program that kind of is built for current leaders and future executives, and the idea is that what I found in the construction industry is that there are some really great people with a ton of leadership potential. And there aren't a lot of environments where they're working on that leadership potential because they're building stuff.
Yeah.
And so
they have to take a break and
right. You have to take a minute, focus on developing yourself. And these are those opportunities we're really happy to start to provide. So if anybody wants to learn more about that, they can jump on our website and navigate to it, or just go to wellbuiltconsulting.com/bootcamp, and you'll be able to find out more there. But that's happening at the beginning of May. We've got a great attendee list building, and it is limited to the number of attendees. And we should be shutting down registration on it next week. So good stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Let's talk about, let's get Ricky in here. So Ricky McLain is our guest today. Ricky, good morning. Thank you very much for joining us from Vermont. Yeah.
Yeah. Good morning. Thanks for having me. I'm not sure how well my video is coming through, but hopefully audio is okay. So nice to be with you.
Yeah, your video looks great right now. Your audio sounds great, but I do know that we have some risks in very rural Vermont of
right.
dropping you periodically. So if it happens, we'll it's all good. We'll roll with it.
Right. I appreciate it. I also want to make nerdy cool. So I appreciate that, that opening.
Right. We better make nerdy cool. Otherwise we're all in trouble.
Yeah, right.
So Ricky is the growth and innovation program manager at WoodWorks. He is all about forwarding the mass timber movement. He's spoken to a lot of different groups about it. He's been on many podcasts to spread the word. We're happy that he's agreed to join us on the Morning Huddle to do the same. So, Ricky, tell us just a little bit for context, a little bit about yourself, who you are, how you got to kind of the position that you're in, and, that type of thing, just for our audience.
Sure. Yeah. No, thank you for inviting me on. My background is in structural engineering. So I'm like you said, based in Vermont. I grew up in Maine, so I've been in New England my whole life. Growing up, my dad had a business where he was basically an arborist. So I was working in the woods, working with trees a lot of my life. Fast forward a little bit in my teens, I really liked doing like carpentry style of work. So using wood in a slightly different context. Went to college for civil and then eventually specialized in structural engineering. And out of college, I got a job at a structural engineering consulting firm. So that was about the first 7 years of my career, designing wood projects, but not specializing in wood projects, also steel, masonry. It was a lot of being in Vermont, there's a lot of ski resorts, and so a lot of very high-end custom homes. So it was sort of a balance of those types of projects, plus municipal projects, fire stations, colleges, schools. So doing the structural design of those projects. And then about 9.5 years ago, almost 10 years ago, I was approached to join WoodWorks, who's the organization that I'm with now. So over the past decade, it's been an interesting journey, really, with mass timber. And maybe we'll talk more about this, but with mass timber really starting and growing in terms of its use throughout the U.S., being able to just be a part of that has been a lot of fun.
Awesome. That's great. And it makes total sense. Sometimes you hear the backstory and you're like, yeah, that makes sense. This was one of those. So it all kind of logically snapped together. So let's not take anything for granted. Let's take a minute and define mass timber. What is it? Just to make sure that our audience is totally up to speed on that. Once you've talked about what it is, I want to talk about some practical applications. Where are we seeing it? And maybe we don't even know it. We're seeing it, but we're not aware.
Right. Yeah. Mass timber to me is an umbrella term. So it encompasses a large number of products. Mass, by the way, mass is short for massive timber. I was talking with somebody recently and they were a little confused. They thought it was short for Massachusetts timber. So mass is short for massive timber. Essentially, to me, it's the modern equivalent of what we called heavy timber construction. So heavy timber construction, and it still goes on today. A lot of people have seen, timber frame construction where there's large columns, maybe a 10-inch by 10-inch column, 12-inch by 12-inch column, but that is a solid cross section of wood. The old adage was large column, large tree. You had to find a tree large enough to cut that column from. So with mass timber, it's very similar size, large members, but you're taking a number of small pieces of wood and laminating them together, usually with adhesives, but sometimes with nails or screws. A lot of the time those small pieces of wood are just commodity wood products, 2x6s, 2x8s, laminated together. And really the variation, and I mentioned it's an umbrella term with a bunch of products within it, all of the products, the main variation between them all is how you laminate those pieces of wood together. In some cases, like glue laminated timber is usually used for beams or columns. And you just take, say, 2x8s or 2x10s and you stack them flat. on top of each other until you build up this cross section. There's adhesive between each layer. You press it, you plane it, so then you have a beam that's maybe 8 3/4 inches wide by 24 inches deep, and it's just solid wood. So versus like panel products within the mass timber category, like cross laminated timber, nail laminated timber, dowel laminated timber, they're taking, again, mostly 2x-dimensional lumber, but orienting them in different ways. So like CLT is probably the most common mass timber panel product.
Yep.
And you're creating multiple layers of laminations. Your first layer is flat. Second layer is also flat, but it's rotated 90 degrees, and you keep stacking them up like that. Exactly. So
Like
you
Jenga.
can get panels that are 8 to 10 feet wide, 50 feet long. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. Awesome. And the benefit of it is its strength. I mean, we'll talk. You know what? Talk about the benefits. You're gonna lay it out faster and cleaner than I will.
Sure. I mean, strength is certainly part of it. Strength to weight ratio in particular. So it's a fairly lightweight material, which has actually been one of the maybe unexpected but tangible benefits with mass timber because it's lightweight. We've seen a number of projects in the U.S. use what's called vertical addition or vertical overbuild, where it's an existing building. You know, for example, there's one in DC, not too far from you, where it was an existing building and they were able to add multiple stories of mass timber on top with fairly minimal reinforcing of the existing building because it's a lightweight material. You know, we've seen other projects where the lightweight of it is a benefit if you're building on a very poor site with poor soils.
Yep.
And, you know, maybe you don't have to do piles or you don't have to do as many piles or whatever. A lot of people choose it for its aesthetics. You know, it obviously looks quite nice on the interior of a building. And it's not just, I like the look of it. It can be a financial benefit as well, because that's a differentiator. You know, in this day and age with the real estate market the way it is, people are looking to create differentiated assets. So if there's thousands of multifamily units under construction in your city, but maybe yours is only one of several that are mass timber, that's a differentiator, right? People are going to want to live there. Maybe you retain tenants longer. It can have real financial benefits to it. There's sustainability benefits, especially now that, you know, jurisdictions and organizations have stated carbon reduction goals. Using mass timber is a way to help meet those goals as well. Speed of construction, you know, reduced labor force on site. There's a number of other potential benefits or reasons that people are using it.
Yeah, right on. Yeah, I think that's a great description. And one of the I remember the first time I got into a conversation with somebody about you know the sustainability aspect of it. It's so I'm going to sound like a total idiot. Oh man, I'm going to make being an idiot cool again. Maybe that's a bit, but no, I had this like head smacking moment, like, right, trees grow, right? Like you can plan that and you can you can orchestrate it. And it is, we forget, I think some people when you picture this clear cutting and just, destroying the landscape, and we're like, yeah, that's how you do it wrong.
Right.
But there are in being in the Northeast. I mean, I've driven through these different managed logging areas and stuff like that. It's awesome.
Yeah.
They've really got it dialed in and doing it in a highly sustainable way. So it is something you can feel good about.
Yeah. And you make a very good point. Like that is fundamental. The sustainable forestry practices are fundamental to the long-term longevity of mass timber as a choice for building material. And that's, like I said, it's for it to last, it has to be sourced from sustainably managed forests. Like that's a very critical part of the whole piece. So it's definitely good to recognize and talk about those things to make sure that, it not only does a tree grow, like you said, and it sequesters carbon and gives off oxygen, but to make sure that that cycle continues to go on, which is why we're able to build more buildings using it, because we're continually replanting trees as we harvest them.
Yeah. I don't know enough about it, but it seems to me that we've gotten pretty good at doing it. At the sustainable forestry practices. It seems like there are some pretty well established best practices. You just do that, and the machine kind of works the way you'd want it to.
Yeah, and there's different ways to measure that. You can actually put metrics to it. There's different forestry certification systems that people can be a part of. There's differences if it's a privately owned forest land or publicly owned forest land. in terms of what the kind of best management practices are. But you're right. Like if basically at any point right now, any mass timber sourced from North America, as well as those coming from Europe, they are coming from sustainably managed forests.
Awesome. All right, good. So what are the different applications? Where are we seeing this stuff today? You mentioned a couple where we might be building a new structure on top of bad soils. Fill in the blank on what that structure might be. And I think so let me frame it up this way. Frame it up, accidental joke. Let me talk about it this way, where when I think about wood structures, I think about single family homes and apartments. That's about all I think about, right? And while I know those are that's right, mass timber has way more applications than single family homes and apartments, and that's a part of what is really exciting about it to me. What are the applications that we're seeing out there?
Yeah, and what's interesting about the answer to that question is it has continued to evolve over time. So to give you a brief snapshot, like the first commercial, all of what we're talking about is, in the grand scheme of things, is relatively new. So the first commercial CLT project in the US was built in 2011.
Wow.
13 years ago, right? Not that long ago. And fast forward to 2022, saw the topping out of the world's tallest mass timber building, which is in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So in a 12-year span, we went from the first CLT project in the US to having the tallest CLT project in the world. So things have progressed quite rapidly in the US. So over that dozen years of time, it's changed significantly where the applications have been. I would say that it started out in comparisons to or replacements of projects that were using what we call post and beam style of construction with maybe steel and concrete. So it was a lot of office buildings, there's a lot of institutional, higher educational facilities where basically you could take, because it competes better cost-wise with those types of structures, you could take, the steel beams and steel columns or the concrete beams and concrete columns, swap them out for timber, do the same thing with a concrete slab on metal deck, swap it out for a timber slab for your floor, for your roof. So that's where we saw most of the initial use and development. Over time, I would say within the past 5 to 6 years, we've seen a significant increase in the use in multifamily. And some of it is like the apartment buildings that you're talking about, Chad, like those scales, 4 to 5 stories. But it's also been because of changes in the building code to allow you to now go significantly taller. It's been projects in the 8 to 14 story range, which has been a lot of the recent interest. Yeah. Mid-rise multifamily has been a big use case for mass timber over the past few years. And now we're actually starting to see it expand into like data centers, warehouses, flex industrial space. So it's really expanding as it becomes more cost competitive, while companies have stated carbon reduction goals. It's kind of pairing the best of both worlds there, and that's expanding its application cases.
That's awesome. So costs are coming down. Why? Are we just getting better at manufacturing it? Is there greater competition? Why are costs coming down of mass timber?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's due to several things, but predominantly it's due to a larger supply chain, pool of manufacturers to choose from. Yeah. So I think at this point we're at about a dozen. So for CLT, and again, mass timber is a bunch of products. CLT is the most common, so I'll talk about that. But for CLT, right now there's about a dozen certified CLT manufacturers. And some of those have multiple locations, but just in terms of number of companies, that's about where we're at. Versus, like I said, 10 years ago, there was like one in all of North America. So the number of manufacturers has increased. The geographic spread of those manufacturers has increased. So transportation costs have gone down, as a result. I think it's also that people are getting a lot smarter on how to design to the efficiencies of mass timber. Like it does take designing the building with mass timber in mind to make sure that it is designed as cost efficiently as possible. Meaning it's not efficient to take, your typical office building that you've designed as a steel and concrete structure with maybe column grids of 30 feet by 40 feet
and just swap it out.
Let's just put mass timber in it. Yeah. It's not gonna cost out. So people are getting smarter to that fact, and they're designing buildings accordingly. So as
That's
a result,
interesting.
costs are going down. Yeah.
So that's the architecture and structural engineering community that's working through that, right, and figuring out how to design it in a way. It's and are owners, asking for this now? Are developers and jurisdictions and so on, different construction owners asking for this?
Yeah, for sure. And in some cases, some cases owners are asking for it when they think that it's like a cheaper option than whatever they would have built out of otherwise. Most of the time, it's not that. So sometimes we'll get people approach us to say, "Hey, I've got this 4-story apartment building. I'd like to use mass timber because it's going to save me money," and that's usually not a reality. It could have other financial. It's the value versus cost trade-off. Like I talked about the potential values earlier of tenant retention, market differentiation, those types of things. But purely from a cost perspective, it's usually not the cheapest option. It might be in the end in an area where you have very high on-site labor costs, because mass timber is usually built faster, like the structure is faster to install, and you have a smaller crew. Like I was at a job site last week in Boston, and I think they had a crew of 6 setting CLT panels every, these were 62-foot long, I think 8-foot wide CLT panels. Each panel was taking about 15 minutes to set. So that's hundreds of square feet set, thousands of square feet set every hour, if you will. Mm-hmm. So it's a fast install process. So it does take the architect and the engineer, like you said, understanding how to design it appropriately. It also takes a contractor who's willing to understand and recognize that you can actually install it faster and put those into the early cost estimates. Because a lot of times what we'll find is that a mass timber project will get started in design. The owner has interest, right? The design team starts with some early design, and then they go to their contractor who may not have mass timber experience. And if they don't know it, understandably, they'll see some risk associated with it. So they might apply some contingencies to early cost estimates or budgets. That goes back to the owner. Like I mentioned earlier, the owners are very wanting to see it as be like the least cost option. So they get this first cost estimate, looks very high, and maybe some of that is real, some of that is inflated due to contingencies. They see that and say, well, we can't overcome that cost delta. Let's go back to what we already know. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's when we start talking about mid-rise, are there cost savings to be had in mid-rise? Is it, when you start taking when you think about concrete and steel structures, my natural reaction is like, well, wood's cheaper. Isn't it? So what's your reaction to that?
Yeah. If we're talking about mass timber, comparing it to those materials, I would say most of the time, no, it's not cheaper as a product.
Right. And you've covered the other parts, right? In terms of labor costs and those types. I follow you there, but from a material cost standpoint, it's not less expensive today than steel and concrete.
Correct. Yeah.
There could be some other savings. Do the math. It's worth considering. And at the end of the day, particularly in those situations like you talked about, where you're building on top of an existing structure, and you don't have to there may be some cost savings in the fact that you don't have to create massive you don't have to figure out how to support all this additional weight, because you can pull that off. Or building on bad soil profiles, where you might be able to save a ton of money from going down and doing pilings and things like that. So that's all really cool stuff. But the product itself, are we predicting a world where it becomes less expensive? Are we predicting a world where it actually does start to pull ahead of steel and concrete construction in terms of cost?
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly some people are. Obviously, there's a lot of unknowns there. Like, I think that a lot of it will come down to continuing to grow the supply chain. So more options, more geographically diverse options. There's a lot of interest in, for some people anyway, seeing eventually mass timber be more of a regionally sourced product, where if you're in New England, you'll source from the mass timber manufacturers that eventually open in New England. If you're in the Southeast, et cetera. So with that, you're able to really, number one, dial in your design a lot more specifically, knowing it's going to come from this 1 or 2 or 3 manufacturers. So let's be more specific in dialing in that design. Transportation costs are less, if you're able to have more predictability in what the cost will be. then you're able to reduce contingencies because risk is reduced. So there's that piece of it. There's again, I think just the continual evolution of people getting smarter to how to design with it, to really dial in their design to match a manufacturer and a fabricator's efficiencies and capabilities. That's a lot of it right now. Is like we'll hear of projects where even designing it as a mass timber building from the start, if you don't know who the manufacturer is going to be because you want to have competitive bids, you could end up with, sizing beams and columns,
Right.
or designing the connection details in such a way that the manufacturer chosen either can't provide or is more
It's
expensive
way
for them
expensive
to
to
provide.
provide, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, that
So
makes sense. And it just runs counter to so much of the procurement norms, design and procurement norms that kind of go on in construction in the United States. I don't know what, significantly if those norms vary in different places around the world, but I know in the US, right, everything's based around this open competition deal, right? Yeah, there's so
yeah.
much of that, and it's there's a lot to be said for that, but there's a these are some of the stumbling blocks at this stage in the game.
Yeah.
That makes sense. I do want to, before we move off of design, because I want to get into construction a little bit, but before we move off design, we have a question from our live audience and want to pass that along to you. So it says, I'd be interested to understand how the structural connections are being taken care and how strong they are when designed to resist lateral, especially in seismic zone area. Thank you.
Yeah. I'll see if I know this is only going to apply to the people on video today, but I've got a few samples of connections. So there's a few different ways that you can do connections in mass timber. Like, so I'm thinking when they say connection, like beams to columns, for example. So usually what happens is that all of that steel hardware, in this case it's aluminum, it can be regular steel, are encased or encapsulated within the timber. Meaning, this is attached to the face of a timber column, and then this part here is attached to the beam. So that in the end, you won't see any of this because it'll all be encased within the timber. So there's a couple things that are going on there. Basically, number one is you're using the wood to protect this for fire purposes. If we talk about fire later or not, basically with large timber members, they have inherent fire resistance. They have to be designed for it, but if you can have a large enough cross section, they do have inherent fire resistance. So you're using the wood thickness that's around this member to protect the steel itself, because unprotected steel, at high temperatures can see structural failure. So that's one thing that's going on. Also, if you'll notice this little notch here, because the question mentioned seismic and drift compatibility, there's certain ways to do this where if you have some of these notches, what that does is it allows elements to rock in a seismic event. And most connections like this, and there's a bunch of styles out there, but most connections have been designed for anywhere from like 2 to 5% drift, which is just a way of measuring, based on the height of the building, how much is it allowed to deflect laterally. So there's some really good testing that's been done on these types of connections, but that's kind of a quick 101 of what they look like and how they perform.
Awesome. Great stuff. So this kind of leads to our next hurdle. So there are clearly some significant strides being made in terms of design and figuring out ways to begin with the end in mind, to end up with a design that was specifically done for a CLT application, for example, and that is therefore cost conscious from the start. Then there's this piece where, okay, now it's designed. Can we build it? Are there contractors who can do this stuff?
Yeah.
And are there enough contractors who can do this stuff? And what's the landscape of the ability of people to install this work?
Yeah, that's a great question. This has been one of the areas that, like, I think a lot of the early education on mass timber was for the architects and engineers. The contractors, I think, were a missing piece for a while. WoodWorks has started to do some education there, both on the installation side as well as the pre-construction coordination and planning side. So to answer your question, I think there's definitely more competent contractors needed, but the pool has been growing. There's several ways that it can work, but to give you a few ideas on some of the most successful ways we've seen it work, there are some, not many, but some groups of very experienced mass timber installers that are just traveling throughout the country.
Yep.
Basically like some people are familiar with, local to you, the new Under Armour headquarters in Baltimore is a mass timber frame structure. The mass timber installer for that is based in Vancouver, British Columbia, right? So they traveled all the way across the country to do the specialized mass timber installation for that project. There's another small group in BC. There's a small group in the Southeast. There's a small group in New England. There's more than that, but those are sort of the one instance, one use case where they'll be a sub to the GC. There are in a few cases some large GCs who are wanting to get smarter to mass timber and taking on self-performing the installation themselves.
Yep.
So that is happening as well. And then in some cases, there are groups that will provide a turnkey package. So you'll provide one contract to a specialty contractor who's procuring the mass timber, who's dealing with all the transportation, who's dealing with the fabrication, coordination, shop drawings, as well as installation. So there's other options, but kind of those three are the most common. And depending on the owner's appetite for risk and budget, obviously, really dictates which of those is the best option for a project.
And if I were, let's say, I were either a general contractor or a framing contractor, or who the heck knows, maybe a steel contractor, right? Somebody else who's they're doing one type of structure, they want to learn another type of structure. How would I get smart about this stuff? How would I go and get that education?
Yeah, there's on the woodworks.org website, we have a couple of resources. We have a mass timber construction management landing page. And then within that, there's some free documents. We've created a free training curriculum, essentially. So it's a series of just PowerPoint modules that anybody can work through on their own. We've also seen like some community colleges use that to do some post-secondary education. We've been working with some carpenters unions around the country to have mock-up structures at their training facilities where they'll basically buy this kind of packaged small CLT structure that's put together and taken apart, by a series of crews that come through their training facility. And then I always advocate for getting out on active job sites. The mass timber community is for the most part anyway, is a very open and sharing community. So see if there's a mass timber project in your area, visit it, see the practices being done on site, ask some questions. Yeah. I think it's a great way to learn.
That's awesome. Great. Really good direct. And then at the end of the day, I'll ask if people have any questions. They're listening to this show, watching this show, and they're thinking, I wonder if Ricky would be open to a call. Can they call you for feedback, or can they reach out to you? And what's the best way to do that?
Sure. Yeah, I'm always open. Always happy to talk mass timber. I'm very active on LinkedIn, so people can certainly find me there. We also have a team of regional directors around the country, so there's somebody close to you no matter where you are. You can find that on the woodworks.org website.
Excellent. All right, cool. Thank you. I want to pause here to thank the sponsors that help to make our show happen. I'll start off with an accounting firm called Katz Abosch, really good group of accountants who also, in addition to tax and audit work, really treat their clients like partners. They know their business inside and out. I could say the same thing about Sandy Spring Bank, which is a fantastic regional bank that just has a great strategy arm and ability to not just help to fund their clients' businesses, but also help them to build cash strategies and take care of their businesses. I'll also talk about Marsh McLennan Agency, which is full service insurance and bonding agency, whether it's property and casualty or health benefits, or you need a bond for your next construction project. Marsh McLennan has you covered. A good group of people that has presence for mid-market companies across the country. And then lastly, Lawrence Law, which is a boutique law firm that really understands what contractors are afraid of, the kinds of challenges that they have to face on a day in, day out basis. And they're there for you, whatever your legal needs. So thank you to our sponsors. I want to, first off, we've had an extremely active chat. When you talked about the mass timber community being, sort of very sharing and open, they're also super open and sharing on the chat, which we love. That's really cool. So I'll ask Stacy, is there anything popping in as a question or a comment there that that we should be getting in front of Ricky?
I think you covered
Oh, you know what? There's one from Sam.
Sam.
Here, I popped that up on the screen.
Are there any government
Subsidies, yep.
subsidies attached to mass timber construction as a more sustainable material than concrete?
Yeah, there's a few routes that I think people could look into further. So there's some grant opportunities, some annual grant opportunities to help mass timber projects as well as to help mass timber research. One of those is run through the USDA Forest Service, Department of Agriculture Forest Service. So every year they run a program called Wood Innovations. So if you go on the Wood Innovations website, they award projects. Usually the applications open in late fall and they're due like around the first of the year. So Wood Innovations grants are a way to, like I said, help either fund the design aspects of a mass timber building if it takes some type of unique design. It's not intended to fund the construction aspect of the building, but more of the design upfront planning. For the past 2 years, there's been a program called the Mass Timber Competition. So it's a combination of U.S. Forest Service and the Softwood Lumber Board. They've awarded, I think, $2 million each year up to 5 or 6 projects to, again, help facilitate the use of mass timber. There have been some local programs. Boston was the first to do it, and then right now Atlanta and New York City are running these programs called Mass Timber Accelerators. And the idea there is that they award $25,000 to 10 different projects it has to be right in those cities to help facilitate, look into feasibility studies associated with the use of mass timber. So it's kind of this broad range of national versus very local. And some cities also have like pilot programs or incentives, not specifically for mass timber, but for reductions in embodied carbon or other sustainability measures. And again, mass timber might be a way to meet those, certainly not the only way.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm also picturing, whether you've talked a lot about sort of like grants and awards and things like that as it relates to government subsidies, but I'm wondering if there's anything that I'm kind of, if you buy an electric car, for example, you qualify for credits, right? Something along those lines. Is any of that in the works for different jurisdictions where they're saying, yeah, hey, choose this over that, and you qualify for 20% credit of whatever it costs to buy those materials?
Yeah, I mean, nothing formalized that I'm aware of right now. There's certainly been some talk about setting up those types of programs. To date, the talk, and if it happens, my guess is that it will be more of a using metrics to track reductions in embodied carbon or reductions in operational energy or both associated with the building. So meaning not tied specifically, it has to be a mass timber building, right? Tied to being able to be smart about using metrics to reduce the embodied carbon of the building as a whole. And certainly the structure makes up a big piece of the building's embodied carbon pie, if you will. But there's other things too, like insulation tends to be a fairly heavy, intensive embodied carbon aspect of a building. So there's different ways to get there. I do think starting with structure, reducing structure, first of all, we're just reducing the quantities to the best ability that we can, and then using materials for those structures that have lower embodied carbon because they're renewable is a good way to do that.
Awesome. All right, cool. Stacy, any questions that you're having for Ricky? I feel like I have officially, like when I said Ricky might be a nerd, like I think I understated it a little bit. No, I mean that was
probably
awesome. That was awesome. Really, really cool.
That was really helpful and awesome, like great at explaining. I was just curious, what kind of mass timber projects can you mention that are going on in the US or the East Coast, Mid-Atlantic area?
Yeah. If people are like, hey, I do want to go and check out a project, do you know, for the majority of our audience is US. I mean, we certainly have folks from places all over the world, so you can feel free to mention projects there too.
Okay. Yeah, and pretty much all that we deal with is US based projects. Through working on mass timber, I've met some really cool international folks as well, but for the most part, we're just working on US projects. First thing I would say is that we have a website called WoodWorks Innovation Network, and if you go there, it's basically an interactive map of mass timber projects throughout the country. So you can find projects local to you, like I mentioned earlier, like try to find a project to tour. Like that's a good way to do it. If you're in whatever city,
Right.
Nashville, you can go and zoom in on Nashville and see what mass timber projects are there. There's, in terms of like projects to just give a shout out to or to mention, one of the things that I kind of lead our efforts on are what we call tall mass timber, meaning projects in excess of say 6 stories. So because that's been something relatively new, the building code changed in 2021 to start allowing those types of projects to occur. So like I mentioned the Ascent Tower in Milwaukee, which is the tallest mass timber building in the world. That's 25 stories, about 280 feet tall. There's a really interesting project in Oakland, California. The timber portion is done. They're still working on completing the rest of it. That's 19 stories of housing. And I say it's interesting because of the way that structurally it's framed. It's called point supported CLT, where instead of there being, columns supporting beams supporting floor slabs, it's just floor slabs supported on columns. So there's no beams in the structure. Very similar to like flat plate construction. But using mass timber to be able to span in both directions between grids of columns. So it shortens the overall height of the building because you don't have beam depths to deal with. There's a really cool private airplane hangar in New Hampshire that I was able to visit recently. It's all mass timber. It's a 210-foot clear span across the entire airplane hangar. I think one of the doors is, what is it, like 100-foot long or 80-foot long door that weighs like 50,000 pounds. Just a really cool structure. That's the United Therapeutics airplane hangar. There's some really cool housing projects going on in the Boston area. There's several projects in DC. There's one of the overbuild, the vertical addition projects that I mentioned is called 80 M Street. That's in the Navy district near the ballpark, the Nationals ballpark. Yeah, I mean, off the top of my head, those are some of the really unique projects
awesome.
That the Under Armour headquarters do.
Yeah, as you're
cool
talking, I'm
projects.
peeking at the website. It is, taking a look at the map. It is incredible how many are now. These aren't all current. These are current and completed. But my immediate reaction was like, wow, it's a lot more than I thought.
Yeah, we track the number of projects. So I think it's about 1,000 built mass timber projects in the U.S. right now, and another roughly 1,000 in design.
Very, very cool. I mean, tons of opportunity, guys. Anytime we're talking about a subject like this of an emerging portion of the construction industry, I mean, there's certainly just the reasons to get excited from a construction standpoint, but man, from a business standpoint, there's a lot of money to be had, a lot of money to be made if we're doing this right. Some people are really going to position themselves as the builders of choice, the designers of choice, and so on. So if my guess, I'll certainly be following you, Ricky, and I would encourage our audience who are compelled to do so to keep their eye on what you're doing and all this content from you and from WoodWorks. Really cool stuff.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. It's been super fun.
It really it seems like it. You're definitely having a good time with it, which is cool. And I think.
Yeah.
One of the things that I noticed coming from one of the participants in the chat commented that, we should be designing buildings to their purpose. And sometimes that means we should have hybrid combination. And I couldn't agree more. I think anytime we nerd out on saying like, let's make a building that has these design out, we're letting the owner down and the ultimate building structure and the tenants and, all those types of things if we're not really focused on designing to purpose. So thank you for sharing that comment as well. I think that's spot on. Ricky, we're out of time. I could continue this conversation and I'm pretty confident I will in some future venues. But for now, I think we'll have to call it. Is there anything we haven't covered that you really want to say before we wrap up?
No, I think we've done it. Just jump in. If anybody's looking to try it out, just get started. Take the first step.
Nice.
Awesome. Thank you so much. We'll see you soon, Ricky.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you both. Take care.
All right. Ricky McLain there. Great guest. A lot of fun.
That was awesome.
I didn't realize how much I liked lumber until I'm going.
I did when I went to that project. So I was excited for him to come on and learn more. They're beautiful. So
yeah. I mean, it's very cool stuff. I'm glad that I think that was another Well, no, that may have come from me, Stacey. I was about to give you credit for saying, "Hey, we need to get Ricky on here," but I think I saw some of Ricky's posts and was like,
I
"Hey,
think you
Stacey,"
did.
I think
Yeah,
you
that
did.
was you.
Audience, here's what I want you to know. I rarely have these types of wins, so I'm going to roll around in this one for a minute. No, Stacey takes care of all of the guests, but from time to time, I have an idea. Darn it!
Yeah,
And
that was a great one.
it was a lot
Great
of fun.
conversation.
So, Stacey, as per usual, I have to make sure that we talk to the audience about, going to the morninghuddleconstructionshow.com website, sign up for our newsletter, make sure that you're subscribed on the platform of choice. I love how many people we're having on some of these live streams, but I also know that I catch approximately 0 live streams and I consume like probably 6 different podcasts every week, if not more. So I get my stuff on Apple. I know some people get their stuff on Spotify and others. We're up on all of those platforms. And if we're not up on one, let us know. We'll make sure that we get there. But that's where the majority of our audience is, consuming this stuff. And if you can't make sitting still, once a week for 45 minutes behind a computer watching this live, we definitely have that solution for you. Make sure that you go to the morninghuddleconstructionshow.com, sign up for the newsletter, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. That is all I have. I mean, you know what? Just tickler for next week. What do we have happening?
Yeah. Matthew DeBarra.
Yeah.
I hope I'm saying that right. So he's going to talk to us about hiring and retention. He's a 4th gen contractor. So looking forward to that conversation. Always a hot topic.
So he's actually started this. I talked to him yesterday, and he actually started this different way of running a recruiting company for construction that I can't wait for the audience to learn more about. But the idea is, what if you never had to pay a recruiting fee, but you had a recruiting firm, and there were maybe not some of the baggage that you have with hiring a typical recruiting firm. So it'll be a fun discussion to kind of pick his brain about how he views recruiting in the construction industry. He has some good stories to share. So, all right, good. Anything else, Stacey, that I'm not thinking of?
Just want to shout out again to Skills USA because we'll be there at their competition in June in Atlanta, Georgia. We'll be interviewing contractors and high school professionals, young professionals that are participating in the competition. So that should be a great time too. So look out for that. And then, of course, I'm starting to book up fall. So if there's anybody particular you want to see on the show for fall, now is the time to please reach out to me. We book up quickly. We have a lot of great guests coming up. And then we'll start in September again.
Yeah, totally agree. Audience, make sure that we're hearing from you with your great ideas for who we should be having on the show. We definitely we have a lot of interested people, and Stacey and I are always kind of wading through, like, should we have this on? Should we have that on? And I think most of the time we have a really good show with interesting and insightful guests, but gosh, hearing from you guys about what you think we should be having on would be really, really valuable. So feel free to send us a direct message on LinkedIn or jump on the website and email us, or however you want. But whether it's you or somebody else that has, a platform where they are creating positive change in the building industry, that's what we're all about.
Cool.
All right.
All right. Have a great day.
See ya.